Everyone knows that A-list love is never easy. But was Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore's relationship doomed from the start? Or were they victims of their own bad luck? Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher were first introduced at a dinner party in 2003. But sparks didn't exactly fly right away. In fact, Kutcher seemed more interested in another dinner guest, as Moore later explained during an interview on Live with Regis and Kelly. She said, "The first night I met him, he didn't have 2 words to say to me. He had a singular focus, and it was on somebody else." However, Moore eventually did get Kutcher's attention when the two met again at a play. Moore was wearing what she referred to in Harper's Bazaar as a dress that gets results. Moore's Proenza Schooler cocktail dress seemed to do the trick. She added, "It was an effective evening. It was a life-changing evening." According to Moore, the relationship was intense in those early days. She later described feeling an instant connection with Kutcher. She said, "I knew it had the potential to be something special right away." Kutcher echoed the sentiment in a 2006 interview with Parade, saying, "I could be totally comfortable on my first date with Demi. It was just there." He also gushed about their happy relationship, claiming they weren't a couple who fought. Kutcher told CBS News, "We had one argument in the first 3 months of dating, and since then, we haven't had any." One reason Moore and Kutcher's relationship so quickly grabbed the public's attention was their 15-year age gap. When the pair began dating, Moore was 40 and Kutcher was 25. When Kutcher hosted Saturday Night Live in 2005, the couple took the opportunity to poke fun at themselves, with Moore dressing up as a much older woman.
My support holes are cutting off my circulation.
They do that.
But Moore wasn't entirely comfortable with the media's obsession over their ages, noting that no one seemed to care that her ex-husband, Bruce Willis, had gone on to marry a woman 23 years his junior. She told ABC News,
"Gosh, I don't know. It's so silly."
In her Harper's Bazaar interview, Moore spoke about disliking the term cougar and joked that she preferred to be called a puma. She said, "It has a sweeter quality, more elegant." Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher would go on to weather their fair share of drama. But the tragedy that struck early on in their relationship was arguably worse than any of it. Moore became pregnant with the couple's child, but later miscarried at 6 months. They had even picked out a name for the baby, a girl they had planned to call Chaplain Ray. Kutcher reflected on the loss during a 2023 interview with Esquire. He said, "Losing a kid that you think you're going to have, and that close to thinking you're going to have a kid, is really, really painful. Everyone deals with that in different ways." For Moore's part, she revealed in her 2019 memoir, Inside Out, that she had been decimated by the experience and felt that Kutcher had a difficult time relating to her grief. She wrote, "First of all, he hadn't carried this baby. And second, he was in his 20s at the time. He wasn't remotely late to the game of fatherhood. His possibilities were not running out." Despite enduring such a painful loss while dating, Moore and Kutcher went on to get married in September 2005. The wedding was something of a secret, and preparations weren't fully in place until the day before the ceremony. A source told People magazine, "It all came together at the very last minute." The couple wed in a small ceremony at their home in Beverly Hills. Another source said, "It was incredibly unpretentious, representing who they really are." Of course, the marriage meant that Kutcher had become the stepfather of Moore's children, something he reflected on in his Esquire interview. He said, "I was 26, bearing the responsibility of an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 12-year-old. That's how some teen parents must experience their 20s. But he pointed out that he certainly wasn't complaining, adding, "I wouldn't have gotten married to a woman that had 3 kids if I didn't love kids." Moore and Kutcher were not shy about openly expressing their love for one another. The couple was especially affectionate on X, then known as Twitter, which led to Time magazine naming them its first Twitter celeb couple. In a 2010 essay for Harper's Bazaar, Kutcher likened declarations of love via social media to more traditional romantic gestures. He wrote, "In some ways, it's no different than sending flowers to the office. You are declaring your love for everyone to see. Who doesn't like to be publicly adored?" Moore and Kutcher seemed more than happy to give fans a glimpse into their relationship, referring to each other by cute nicknames like Baby Boo and Pillow Partner in their tweets. For Valentine's Day in 2010, Moore and Kutcher began a charity together in lieu of exchanging gifts. The pair started the DNA Foundation, which aimed to help victims of human trafficking. At the time, Kutcher told Reuters, "There are 350,000 trafficked people here in the United States. We're sending the girls flowers and making them our Valentines so they know that someone can love them without asking for anything back." The couple used social media to bring attention to the horrors of human trafficking and to spread the word about their foundation.
I've been on FBI raids where I've seen things that no person should ever see.
Now known as Thorn, the foundation continues to operate, focusing on protecting children from sexual abuse. Having a miscarriage 6 months into her pregnancy didn't deter Moore from continuing to attempt to start a family with Kutcher. Moore revealed in her memoir that she underwent IVF treatments, but to no avail. The sorrow she felt took a toll on her as she began to feel increasingly desperate.
I really lost sight of everything that was right in front of me, which is the family I had.
Moore also shared that her pain and singular focus on having another child put a strain on her and Kutcher's relationship.
It's kind of a natural thing to pull back when somebody's, clinging too tight.
The situation also hurt Moore's daughters, especially Rumor Willis.
It was like, oh, well, we're not enough.
Things began to go awry at some point during Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher's marriage, despite Moore's attempts to be the perfect wife. In her memoir, she revealed that she, quote, went into contortions to fit the mold of the woman he wanted his wife to be. As it turned out, this included going along with Kutcher's desire to open up their relationship sexually. Moore wrote, "I put him first, so when he expressed his fantasy of bringing a third person into our bed, I didn't say no. I wanted to show him how great and fun I could be." However, these experiences were ultimately not the best for the relationship, and Moore was left with regret. Of the people she and Kutcher invited into their relationship, she wrote, "They were good people, but it was still a mistake." Although she had been a willing participant in their sexual adventures, Moore admitted that the threesomes they engaged in caused her to feel a great deal of shame. Moore and Kutcher's threesomes during the waning days of their relationship created an unintended outcome. In her book, Moore wrote, "Because we had brought in a third party into our relationship, Ashton said that blurred the lines and to some extent justified what he's done." This was referring to the fact that Kutcher had once cheated on Moore. In 2011, a 22-year-old woman named Sarah Leal went public when she and Kutcher had sex following an all-night party at the Hard Rock Hotel in San Diego. According to a report by Us Weekly, the incident occurred on Moore and Kutcher's 6th wedding anniversary, although Kutcher reportedly told Leal he and Moore were separated at the time. Moore wrote in her memoir, "He admitted it right away." Kutcher later spoke about the cheating allegations with Esquire, saying, "You own the you did wrong, and you go forward." Infidelity seems to have been the final straw in Demi Moore and Ashton Kutcher's relationship, as they announced their split shortly after Kutcher was accused of cheating. But even before the divorce was finalized in 2013, the marriage had taken its toll on Moore's health and well-being. Moore, who had been sober for decades, suddenly found herself drinking and taking prescription pills, as well as using synthetic marijuana, which landed her in the hospital. A source told People magazine in 2012 she wasn't sleeping as well, didn't seem to be eating, and looked really gaunt. Moore opened up about the pain she'd experienced during her interview with Diane Sawyer.
I blinded myself, and I lost myself.
She added that it wasn't only the end of her relationship with Kutcher that was devastating.
It was really about my whole life.
Kutcher didn't leave the marriage unscathed either. He later told Esquire, "Nothing makes you feel like a failure like divorce. Divorce feels like a wholesale failure. You failed at marriage." Although Moore and Kutcher split in November 2011, Kutcher remained close with at least one of Moore's daughters, Rumor Willis. In 2012, Willis, who was pursuing a singing career at the time, performed a show at Hollywood's Sayers Club, with Kutcher cheering her on from the audience and snapping pics with his phone. In 2014, Willis told Access Hollywood that she was still in touch with her ex-stepfather, even congratulating him on the birth of his daughter with his current wife, Mila Kunis. She also explained that she'd been reflecting on Kutcher's relationship with her mother, which she was able to see from a new perspective. She pointed out that when Kutcher started dating Moore, he had been younger than Willis was at the time of that interview. She added, "That would be like me meeting someone who already had 3 teenage kids, and kind of going into that whole situation was crazy." In 2019, after coming to a place where she had reclaimed her sobriety and wellness, Demi Moore released her memoir, Inside Out. The book revealed plenty of bombshells about her life and relationship with Ashton Kutcher. Ahead of the book's publication, Moore told the New York Times, "It's exciting, and yet I feel very vulnerable. There is no cover of a character. It's not somebody else's interpretation of me." While Moore was empowered by telling her story, Kutcher was less than thrilled about certain details of his personal life becoming public. He shared his dismay with Esquire, explaining, "I was pissed. I'd finally gotten to a place where the press had really laid off me and Mila, and my life and my family. And then the next day, the paparazzi are at my kid's school." But he acknowledged that overall, life was good, and said that he was unwilling to linger in the negativity of his past. He said, "I don't want to open anything up in that realm."
I had no idea that we went to the same high school.
We have a lot in common.
In 2022, it seemed tensions had finally died down between Moore and Kutcher, as Moore and Kutcher's current wife, Mila Kunis, starred in a commercial together. Kunis and Kutcher, who met while starring on That 70s Show, married in 2015 and shared 2 children. The ad for AT&T aired during the Super Bowl. It features 2 women at a high school reunion who approach the stage at the same time as the school's Most Admired Alum Award is about to be presented. It turns out to be neither of them, so they share some awkward banter. It turns out Moore and Kunis really did attend the same high school too, Fairfax High School in Los Angeles, and it was Kunis who reached out to Moore with ideas for the commercial. Moore told Entertainment Tonight, "Who knew being a Fairfax alum would have brought this unexpected opportunity to come together with Mila in such a fun and playful way?"